Good day everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is my Zorki 4 with Jupiter 8 lens. This was made in 1971. This is an export model with English lettering, not Cyrillic. And it says made in USSR on the bottom plate. So this is a derivative of a Leica thread mount rangefinder camera. Zorki 4 is one of the very best of the Soviet-era rangefinder cameras. I've had this since maybe the late 1980s. I bought it on consignment from a local seller. Recently, however, my friend Ethan Moses has gotten into exploring the world of Leica thread mount cameras and their Soviet-made derivatives. In the process of visiting him the last few weeks, he discovered that he really liked the Zorki 1, which was several generations prior to this, mainly because of its diminutive size. It has less features than the Model 4 Zorki. So I got interested in it, and last week I ordered a Zorki 1 with a lens, and I have not unboxed it yet. Okay, let's get into unboxing the camera. I have my Opinel number, what is this, number 5, I believe? Oh, the number 8 Opinel knife. The trick is always getting through the initial layer of packing tape. All right. So bubble wrap. Looks like it's pretty well packed. There we go. Comes in its original leather case, which is actually kind of cool. And the case has Cyrillic lettering. So it has 2 snaps, and it folds down, and then it unscrews. The tripod socket is on the right side of the camera instead of on the middle. So it has the Zorki in Cyrillic on the top plate, has the little Zorki prism symbol. And okay, so one of the things about the Zorki 1 is it doesn't have as many slow speeds. The fast speeds go 500th, 250th, 100th, a 50th, and then it goes down to a 25th. But it doesn't have the slow speed movement that the later Zorki 4 does. So if you notice, the Zorki 4 goes down to a 60th, 15th, 8th, quarter, half a second, and 1 second. And then, of course, the 30th is over here. So this is a good opportunity. Before we explore it any further, you'll notice, first of all, the size difference. So the Zorki 4 is definitely wider than the Zorki 1. And you can see the height difference. Yeah, it is definitely a taller body on the Zorki 4, mainly because of the bigger viewfinder. And it's a combined viewfinder rangefinder all in one, whereas the Zorki 1 has a separate viewfinder rangefinder system and a little more compact top plate. As far as the side views, they're pretty much the same thickness, however. The lens. So this is an extendable lens, Industar 22, and it extends and sort of turns into a lock there. And then the focusing is locked, and you have a little button you push right here, and there's a focusing lever. And it has distance markings and depth of field markings. So the distance markings are around the lens flange, and then the depth of field markings are on the lens itself. The focusing lever is definitely a nice feel to it compared to my Jupiter 8 lens, which, by the way, the Jupiter 8 is a wonderful lens, but it has just a rotating distance for focusing scale and then an aperture scale, an aperture dial up here, and it's kind of easy sometimes to accidentally hit one instead of the other. Whereas on the Industar 22, the actual aperture f-stop is a little less convenient because you have to turn this ring around the front of the lens to change the f-stop. So focusing is a little more convenient on the Industar, aperture a little less so. But it's a collapsible lens, which is cool. So when you're extending the lens, there's something to be careful of or to make note of. You pull the lens barrel out, And if you notice at this point, you can push it in and out. And if you don't have it all the way out, your focus won't be proper. What you want to do is then turn it a little bit to this direction, which would be clockwise facing the front of the lens. And now you can't push it back in. That's sort of the locked position of it when it's open. And now you can push your little button on your focusing ring, unlock your focusing ring, and now you're set to focus. And you can, of course, scale focus and or rangefinder focus. And then to collapse the lens, you want to set the focus back to the detent position, turn the ring slightly, and then collapse it down. I haven't obviously checked out or tested the camera, but we want to change the shutter speeds and we want to test fire the shutter. So I'm going to just roll it until it locks, and then, okay, then we're going to roll it. And with these kinds of cameras, you don't want to change the shutter speed unless it's cocked. So that was a 50th, a 100th, 250th, 500th, and then we'll go down to 25th, which does sound slower, and then there's bulb, and it feels like the bulb is working also. So, taking the back off, let's compare these two cameras. So with the Zorki, you have these two levers that you twist opposite directions, and the entire back plate and bottom plate comes off as one unit, integral. This is a more modern layout. And you have, of course, the plastic film spool that you don't want to lose, right? Whereas the Zorki 1 is very much like a earlier Leica thread mount. So you have this bayonet, and you have to know Cyrillic lettering, right? So let's see, I think it goes like that. And so this is more like the traditional Leica thread mount in its bottom loading, and you have a narrow slit here where you have to load your film into. So the film spool goes into this compartment here, the film threads around, and then you have this spool here that you attach the tongue, the leader of the film to. Okay, so there is a little groove right in here. That is where this locking lever is supposed to engage in order to keep the bottom plate locked in place. So since I don't read Cyrillic, the words beginning with what looks like a letter O is open. So open is that direction, close would be the other direction. So that's the open position. On the other side of it, you have to get that little hole lined up with that little protrusion. Then get this, and then turn it 180 degrees and test it and make sure the bottom plate stays on. There it is, it's on. Okay, the viewfinder on the right is the actual viewfinder itself for framing up the composition. The finder on the left is for rangefinder focusing, and there will be a split image. This is the inlet for the rangefinder patch. The image comes through, bounces through a prism or a mirror across to the prism, and is combined with this image here to form the rangefinder focusing patch. Okay, here's an attempt to show you the rangefinder patch. You can see focusing on the vertical line and that yellowish patch in the middle. As I turn focus back and forth, it moves left and right. Get it focus lined up there. And here I'm actually holding the Zorki upside down in order to get it close enough to my digital camera lens to get this angle of view. So you can see the part of the lens is in the upper part of the frame. Well, that would actually be near the lower part of the frame if you were holding the camera right side up, as you normally would be. The viewfinder section is actually surprisingly clear and pretty good contrast, especially considering the age of the camera and how small the viewfinder appears from the outside. But it has a frame line that matches the 50mm 5cm f3.5 Industar lens, which is really nice. There's one other thing that differentiates the viewfinders between these two cameras. That is the rangefinder baseline. So that's the distance between the visual viewfinder and the rangefinder window. And so on the Zorki 1, the baseline measures about 38 millimeters for the rangefinder. And on the Zorki 4, if I center it up here, it measures about 39 millimeters. So there's really not a significant difference between these two in terms of rangefinder baseline. They both have about the same accuracy in that sense. But one other factor that you might want to be aware of is parallax. In the Zorki 4, the visual viewfinder is further displaced to the left from the center line of the lens than the Zorki 1. So I'm going to sort of approximate the center of the viewfinder to the center of the lens is about 30 millimeters with the Zorki 4. And because on the Zorki 1, the visual viewfinder is closer to the center of the lens than the rangefinder, it's only about 10 millimeters offset. So the visual viewfinder on the Zorki 1 is closer, considerably closer to the center of the lens, horizontally speaking, and so it's going to give you less parallax error horizontally than the Zorki 4. Okay, so I'd like to unscrew the lens, so I'm going to set focus to the minimal focus distance, I think, that retracts the lens thread, lens mount thread into the lens, I think, and then we'll just go like this. All right. So the threads on the lens mount appear to be in pretty good shape. This is the focusing cam for the rangefinder. So what I'd like to do here is look at the shutter, and if I can open up my exposure a little bit, and I'm going to wind on the shutter. You can kind of take a look at the quality of the shutter, and then I'm on bulb mode right here. So first and second curtain. Now let's see about some of the faster speeds. Let's try a 25th of a second. And then a 50th. Definitely sounds faster. And then 100th. Sounds faster yet. 2/50th. And then a 500th. Well, in general terms, they sound like they're different speeds, each one of them, as far as whether they're capping or dragging or whatever, that remains to be seen. The problem with these bottom-loading cameras is you can't look at the film gate from the back of the camera like you can with something like the Zorki, where you can open up the back completely. So we really won't be able to check out the shutter any better until the camera is completely disassembled and I have the shutter crate, the frame of the camera where the shutter's mounted, until I have that out of the camera itself. So as I hold this lens by the lens mount itself and I focus it, you can see, let me turn it this way, you might be able to see the way those inner helical threads move in and out. And those threads that move in toward the camera body are what presses on the rangefinder focusing cam, which in turn gives you that split image indication in the viewfinder, in the focusing finder. And since we have two Zorki cameras here, the Zorki 4 with the Jupiter 8 lens, let's weigh it and see how heavy it is. 693 grams. And now the Zorki 1 with the Industar 22, 5 centimeter, 508 grams. 508 versus 693. So there's a good 180 or so grams lighter in weight with the Zorki. So that's maybe a third of a pound or so. So that's considerably lighter. Well, so as I compare both of these Zorki rangefinder cameras, the 1E is certainly smaller and feels lighter to me in hand. I've used the 4 since the late 1980s, maybe, off and on. And my experience with it has been, it's been a pretty reliable camera. You know, when you look at the front of the viewfinder, it looks pretty sizable, but because it's a higher magnification viewfinder, I really can't see the full edge of the frame, even without glasses, without getting my eye all the way up to the viewfinder. So being able to see the full frame for determining your framing is kind of troublesome in the Zorki 4. But it does have an adjustable diopter to correct for your prescription, so you can use it without glasses if you need to. Now, on the other hand, the Zorki 1E, though it has a physically smaller looking viewfinder, when I look in it, I can see the entire viewfinder image out to the frame line. It looks more like a tunnel with a smaller image at the end, so it's a lower magnification viewfinder, but it really is clearer to me than this one. And also because of the way the optics are, when I look into it, like for instance, I'm not wearing glasses right now, so when I look at the camera out here where you're at, it's a little bit soft because I'm not wearing my glasses, but when I use the rangefinder, it sharpens it up right away. So everything looks nice and sharp through this viewfinder, and I can see the frame line, and so I can really determine my framing actually easier with this viewfinder than with the Zorki 4s. So I'm really anxious to see how this is going to work for me. And so even before I take this apart and try servicing it, I think I'm going to put a roll of color film in it. Inexpensive if I can find a cheap color roll of film, and go shoot a roll and then bring it up to Picture Perfect here in Albuquerque and have them develop it and see what the results are. Yeah, I'm going to give me a roll of cheap film and put it through there. And if I do that, I'll take you with me and I'll show you the results. And, oh, well, we'll see what happens. I may be taking this camera apart. If I do, we'll cover that in a future episode. I do have the idea, though, of maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe taking the top and bottom plates and refinishing them with a different finish. My friend Ethan Moses has been doing this with some of these cameras. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it yet because this one really is pretty good shape, really nice finish. So we'll see. But this is from 1955. It's patterned after an earlier Leica thread mount Barnack type camera, and I really like the weight and size of it, especially with the collapsible Industar lens. It just makes it really nice and portable to carry around. So there you go, Zorki 1E, a new camera. Maybe this will get me back into shooting more roll film. I hope so. Well, if you guys have any comments or questions, drop them down below. I'd love to have a dialogue with you about them. And in the meantime, keep shooting. Stay creative. Have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.